Hello, it's Joe, and in this video I am going to be talking about 5 of the books that I read recently. As always, there will be timestamps and trigger warnings for these books in the description if you want to check those out. The first book is Children of Virtue and Vengeance by Tomi Adeyemi. This is the long-awaited sequel to Children of Blood and Bone, and it follows our main characters Zaylee and Amari as they deal with the aftermath of that first book. I'm going to try and remember to link my Goodreads review of this book in the description because I essentially break down the pros and cons of this book, because basically I ended up being quite disappointed by this. I really enjoyed Children of Blood and Bone, so I was naturally really looking forward to this one. I ended up giving it 3.5 out of 5 stars, which means I did enjoy it, but I didn't enjoy it quite as much as I expected to. It did have a lot going for it. First of all, I think that Tomi Adeyemi's writing has improved drastically since the first book, and I think that's really apparent. She's really good at getting emotion into her writing, and I think it just bleeds out of the page from the characters. I think some of the characters had amazing arcs in this book, and the depictions of grief in particular were really spot on in my opinion. I also really loved the platonic relationships in this book. Pretty much all of them were really well nuanced and fleshed out, and I really enjoyed the dynamics between those characters. Unfortunately, I did not like any of the romances in this book. I think that Tomi Adeyemi really is not the best at writing romances. I only have this book and the previous book to go off, but I didn't like the romances in the first book either, and in this one there are sort of the same ones with another one added in or another couple added in, and basically I just didn't care about any of them. They just fell really flat for me, and the dynamics between the characters that were supposed to be romantically involved, I just wasn't buying them. It felt very forced, especially when compared to the platonic relationships that I've already mentioned. It just didn't come across as real to me. I also think this book had a lot packed into it, but also not much really happened to progress the overall plot. I could kind of tell that Tomi Adeyemi hadn't plotted out the whole series when she wrote the first book. I think in this book it's kind of apparent that she wasn't really sure where she wanted to take the story, especially with the ending of this book. Obviously I'm not going to spoil it, but I was very confused. Despite my disappointment with this book, I will still definitely be picking up the next book, and I'll pick up any book Tomi Adeyemi writes, to be honest, because I think she's a really nice person. I've met her once or twice and she's just lovely, and as I say, I do think her writing is improving, and there are a lot of strong aspects to her books, so I'll definitely be picking up the next one in this series. I personally just hope that she takes a lot more time with it rather than kind of rushing it out. Not that this was rushed out, because it was actually pushed back twice, but I think if she takes even more time, then I think the next book could really be something special. The next book is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern, which I gave 2 out of 5 stars. And I talked about it recently in my worst books of 2019 video. So as you can imagine, I did not like it very much. I buddy read it with Tom from TJ Reads the Stars, and he didn't really like it either. It was just a bit of a mess, if I'm being honest. So it follows a young man named Zachary who finds this book in his university library, and in the book there is kind of a story about him, and he's like very confused about it, and essentially the book leads him to discover this underground hotel. I'm going to call it a hotel. It's a very weird place, and it's called the Starless Sea, and it's full of mystery and magic, and apart from that I'm not really sure what else went on, because like where was the plot? So many people absolutely love this book. I've seen it on so many best books of last year videos, and if you love flowery prose and books that rely heavily on atmosphere to mask the meandering plot and flat characters, then I think you'll really like it as well. But for me personally, this book was just very frustrating and confusing. And if there's one thing that I hate when reading, I hate being made to feel like I'm stupid. And this book made me feel like I was stupid. So I just wasn't a big fan of it. I feel like someone might have dared Erin Morgenstern to write a book even more lackluster and empty than The Night Circus, and this is what she came up with. She gave it a good go, because this was definitely... Well, it wasn't good, folks, and I'm going to move on now. The next book is Deposing Nathan by Zach Smedley, and I gave this 3.5 out of 5 stars. This book follows Nathan and Cameron, and it is set in 2 timelines told only from the perspective of Nathan. The present timeline is Nathan and Cameron in a... oh, I forgot what it's called. Like, the giving testimony and telling a lawyer or a judge or whatever what happened, because essentially Cameron has stabbed Nathan. But in the other timeline, in the past, we're seeing Nathan and Cameron as they meet and become best friends. So it's kind of this interwoven plot that you're kind of wondering how the 2 best friends got to this point. And personally, I thought it was executed really, really well, especially when you consider that this is the author's debut novel. So the structure and the pacing of the book was really well done. The characters, I thought, were written really well. They were definitely driving the plot rather than the plot driving them, which I personally really enjoy. Unfortunately, I just didn't feel the emotion that I think this book was trying to make me feel. As I say, I did enjoy it, I found it entertaining, but it's a book with quite heavy topics, and normally those things would make me emotional when reading, but I just didn't really feel it, and I'm not really sure why, but that's the reason I couldn't really give it any more than 3.5 out of 5 stars. Well, that and the fact that some of the dialogue in this book just came across as like really unrealistic to me. Not all of it, because as I say, the characters did feel real and fleshed out and everything. It's just some of the lines were just very cheesy to me and did not feel like things that teenagers would say. But I am not a teenager anymore, and I haven't been for like 5 years, so maybe it's just me being old. But I did love the ending of this book a lot. I thought it kind of diverted from typical YA contemporary endings, and I appreciated that. So yeah, when Zach Smedley eventually writes another book, I think I will give him another try, because this is one of those easy to read contemporaries that you can just fly through, and I love doing that because it makes me feel like I've accomplished something when I can read a book very quickly. The next book is Sulwe by Lupita Nyong'o, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. This is a children's picture book that I read in Waterstones with Emma from Emma Novella when I went up to Edinburgh in the new year, and we just sat and read it together in Waterstones in like 5 minutes. And it essentially follows a young girl who is struggling with the fact that she has dark skin, and she's struggling to love herself for that dark skin, and the book essentially follows her journey as she learns to love herself for who she is and to love the skin that she's in. So I thought it was a really great message, of course, and the illustrations were absolutely stunning. I remember me and Emma gasping at some points because the pictures were so beautiful. And yeah, I just think this is a really important children's book that will teach young children, especially young dark-skinned black children, to love the skin that they're in and to love themselves for who they are. And I think that's a really important message, so I really enjoyed this one. And book number 5 is Clockwork Angel by Cassandra Clare. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. This book follows a 16 or 17-year-old girl called Tessa, who has travelled from New York to London to live with her older brother after their auntie has sadly passed away. However, when she arrives in London, she is kidnapped by 2 dark sisters, and essentially tortured until she reveals these powers that she didn't even know she had. She eventually escapes the sisters and ends up in the Shadowhunter Academy in London, and that's where the story really kicks off, because from there she has to sort of discover who she is, where she came from, and also find her brother. I have a full, lengthy, spoiler-free review of this book on Goodreads, so I'm going to try and remember to link that below, but I will also try and summarize my thoughts here. Basically, I've been debating reading this book for a long time because obviously it's a very popular book series. Cassandra Clare is a very popular author. I just wasn't sure whether it'd be for me. But then I watched Mariam from Mariam Reads Sometimes read this book and the 2 other books in the trilogy in a video, and that video kind of sold it for me in the end, and so I picked up this book. And honestly, I have to thank Mariam because I really enjoyed this. And I also buddy read this with Andy, who had actually read it before, but he loves it a lot and was willing to read it along with me, so that was fun. Basically, I loved the atmosphere. I thought the writing was really well balanced. The characters were very well fleshed out and felt absolutely real, and the plot was engaging. I mean, what more do you want, really? I did have a couple of issues with it, which is why I ended up giving it 4 stars rather than 5, and one of those was the fact that our only Asian character in the book was described in a way that kind of leaned on stereotypes, because his eye shape was described and the author didn't describe any other characters' eye shapes, so that kind of left a bit of a bitter taste in my mouth. I didn't really enjoy that. And also the villain was extremely one-dimensional and not very well fleshed out at all when compared to our protagonists. But if I'm being honest, I'm much more of a hero person rather than a villain person, so it didn't bother me that much because, again, I only dropped off 1 star. And I'm happy to announce that my first venture into the world of Shadowhunters was a success, and I will definitely be continuing on with this trilogy. If you want to know more detailed thoughts about what I thought of this book, again, my review will be linked in the description, so you can go and check that out at your leisure. And I will definitely be letting you know when I've read the other 2 books in the trilogy and what I thought of them. So those are the 5 books. If you've read any of them, let me know what you thought in the comments below. If you liked this video, make sure to give it a like or a thumbs up. If you think you like more of my videos, then subscribe below. All of my social media links will be down in the description if you want to check those out. But other than that, thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having an amazing day. Goodbye.